Hey, Master Chief, run down to the mess and make sure the coffee's hot for the brief. The real operators have some work to do. That one sentence, that single, dismissive comment, would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter careers and redefine a legendary SEAL team. At Forward Operating Base Dagger, carved out of the sun-scorched earth of some forgotten corner of the world, Lieutenant Commander Elias Thorne, calcined Viper, saw an old man. He saw graying temples, a slightly stooped posture, and hands that looked more suited to fixing a generator than holding a rifle. He saw Master Chief Petty Officer Elias Vance and saw nothing at all. But in 5 minutes, just 5 short minutes, Thorne and his entire cocky entourage would learn a truth so profound it would physically steal the air from their lungs. The old man wasn't there to make coffee. He was the most decorated, most feared, and most respected operator their community had produced in a generation, and he was there to pass judgment. This isn't just a story about a mistaken identity, folks. This is a story about the rot that can fester in the heart of even the most elite units when ego replaces ethos and when arrogance is mistaken for strength. What did Master Chief Vance do? And what fate awaited Lieutenant Commander Thorne? Stick with me, because the story you're about to hear is a masterclass in quiet professionalism and devastating consequences. If you click away now, you'll miss the moment everything changed. I promise you want to be here for this. Let's begin. The sun over Fob Dagger was a merciless hammer, beating down on the dust and gravel that coated everything. It was just after 1400 hours. The rhythmic thumping of helicopter blades receded into the distance as Strike Team Ares, Thorne's unit, swaggered back into the compound. They were loud, drenched in sweat and bravado, fresh off a supposedly successful reconnaissance patrol. Piece of cake, Thorne boasted, stripping off his helmet and running a hand through his perfectly coiffed, sweat-matted hair. Didn't see a damn thing? High-speed training run, boys. His inner circle, a handful of equally arrogant young operators, laughed and slapped each other on the back. Standing off to the side, near a stack of Pelican cases, was Master Chief Elias Vance. He had arrived 2 days prior on a supply transport, his orders simply listing him as temporary attached personnel for logistical oversight. He was in his late 50s. With a wiry frame that seemed lost inside his desert tan fatigues. His face was a roadmap of deep lines etched by decades of sun and stress, and his eyes were a pale, piercing blue that seemed to take in everything without revealing a single thought. He'd spent his time quietly observing, speaking only when spoken to, which was rarely. Thorne spotted him. To Thorne, Vance was part of the background senior Yanather aging senior enlisted man, sent to a forward base to finish out his time before retirement. A non-operator, a nobody. It was then he uttered those fateful words. Hey, Master Chief, run down to the mess and make sure the coffee's hot for the brief. The real operators have some work to do. A few of Thorne's men snickered. Vance didn't react. He didn't even seem to register the insult. He simply gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, his gaze lingering on the team's gear for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He saw custom, unauthorized paint jobs on their rifles' scopes mounted in properly gear that looked more suited for a magazine cover than a combat zone. Thorne, basking in his perceived authority, turned to head towards the command tent for his debrief. He was about to shove past Vance when the main flap of the tent was thrown open. Captain Miller, the FOB's commanding officer man with 25 years in the Navy and a permanent scowl, strode out. But his scowl was gone, replaced by a look of profound, almost nervous respect. And he wasn't looking at Thorne. His eyes were locked on Vance. Miller snapped to attention, a full, parade ground salute. It was so out of place in the dusty, informal environment of the FOB that it was jarring. Master Chief Vance, Miller said, his voice sharp and clear. My apologies, sir. I didn't realize you were out here. We've been waiting for you to begin the command review. The words hung in the scorching air. Sir, command review. The snickering from Thorne's men died instantly. The blood drained from Alex Thorne's face, leaving a sickly, pale mask of confusion and dawning horror. It was as if the world had just tilted on its axis. Captains do not call Master Chiefs, sir. Captains do not apologize to them. Captains do not wait for them to begin anything. Unless that Master Chief was a living legend. Unless he was Elias Vance, calcined Librarian, the man who had written half the operational doctrine for Naval Special Warfare Command. The man whose opinion could make or break the careers of officers 3 ranks above him. The man sent from the very top to conduct a full-scale audit of the teams, their readiness, their leadership, and their very soul. Vance finally spoke, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the sudden, suffocating silence with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He looked directly at Captain Miller, but everyone knew who his words were for. "First thing we need to review, Captain," Vance said, his pale eyes finally flicking to meet Thorne's, "is the command climate. It seems some of your officers have forgotten who the real operators are and what their job is." The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, Lieutenant Commander Thorne understood he hadn't just insulted an old man. He had spat in the face of his own history, his own ethos, and a reckoning was coming. As Thorne and his team stood frozen, Vance walked past them into the command tent, Captain Miller trailing him like a nervous aide. The planned debrief was instantly forgotten. A new, far more terrifying agenda had just been set. Inside the cool, dim tent, Vance didn't take the offered chair. Instead, he walked over to the large tactical map covering one wall. "Captain Miller," Vance began, his back still to the room, "I'm not interested in your prepared briefings. I'm not here to see the dog and pony show. I'm here to see the truth." Miller swallowed hard. "Master Chief, I assure you, this command is operating at peak." "No," Vance cut him off, turning around. His eyes were cold. "It's not. I've been here 48 hours. I've seen enough to know that's a lie." He gestured for Miller to follow him and strode back out into the oppressive heat, leaving a stunned command staff in his wake. His first destination wasn't the armory or the communications hub as Miller expected. He walked straight to the team barracks, the metal container units where the SEALs lived. Thorne, having regained some semblance of composure, followed at a distance, a knot of dread tightening in his gut. Vance didn't go to Thorne's personal quarters or the quarters of his senior enlisted. He walked to the very end of the row, to a container shared by 2 of the newest members of the team. He pushed the door open without knocking. The smell of sweat and stale air hit them. The room was a mess. Gear was strewn about, uncleaned. A plate with half-eaten food from the day before was attracting flies on a small table. "This is a readiness issue, Captain," Vance said quietly, his voice dangerously low. He pointed to a rifle leaning against a cot. It was caked in fine dust. "An operator's weapon is his life. This isn't a life, it's a liability." He bent down, his old joints creaking slightly, and picked up a body armor vest. He ran a finger along the ceramic plate inside. Then he looked at a young operator who was scrambling to stand at attention. "Son, when was the last time you inspected your plates for cracks?" The young man, barely 22, stammered. Before the last op, Master Chief, I think." "You think?" Vance's voice was still quiet, but it held an edge that made the air crackle. He turned to Miller. "This is the foundation, Captain. The absolute basics. If this is failing, everything built on top of it is rotten." He left the barracks and headed for the motor pool. Again, he ignored the gleaming, well-maintained vehicles parked out front, ones Thorne's team used. He walked to the back, to a section where older, dust-covered Humvees and ATVs were parked. He ran a hand over a tire on one of the Humvees. It was worn, the tread nearly gone. He checked the oil. The dipstick came out nearly dry, coated in a black sludge. "This vehicle is listed as mission-capable in your morning reports," Vance stated. Not as a question, he held up the dipstick for Miller to see. "You want to tell me what kind of mission this is capable of, getting a team stranded and killed?" Miller's face was ashen. "I'll speak to the maintenance chief immediately." "Don't bother," Vance said, wiping his hand on a rag. "The maintenance chief follows the priorities set by command. And it's clear the priority here is looking good, not being good." His tour continued, to the med bay, where he found expired morphine auto-injectors in a trauma bag, to the armory, where the official inventory logs for sensitive items like night vision goggles and laser designators had entries that were sloppily penciled in with clear erasures and corrections. Each stop was a quiet, methodical dismantling of the facade Captain Miller and Lieutenant Commander Thorne had so carefully constructed. Vance didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet disappointment, his pointed, simple questions, were more damning than any tirade. He was showing them, piece by agonizing piece, that their entire operation was a house of cards. The junior enlisted personnel they passed watched with wide, fearful eyes. They had lived with these problems for months, but had been too intimidated by Thorne's aggressive leadership to speak up. Now, someone was finally seeing what they saw. The sun began to dip low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Vance stopped near the perimeter fence, looking out at the vast, empty desert. Thorne, who had been shadowing the entire inspection, finally found the courage to approach. "Master Chief," Thorne said, his voice strained. "If you have concerns, you can address them with me directly. My team's readiness is my responsibility." Vance turned his head slowly, his pale eyes fixing on Thorne. For a long moment, he said nothing. "No, Lieutenant Commander," he finally replied. "Your team's lives are your responsibility. Their readiness is just the tool you use to protect those lives, and right now your tools are broken. Your priorities are backward, and I'm starting to think you are, too." With that, Vance turned and walked back toward the command tent, leaving Thorne standing alone in the gathering dusk, the weight of his failure pressing down on him like the desert heat itself. Later that evening, the oppressive heat of the day gave way to a cool desert night. The base was quiet, the generators humming a steady, monotonous tune. Master Chief Vance didn't go to the officers' mess for dinner. He took a tray and sat in the enlisted dining facility, at a corner table, alone. The younger sailors and soldiers gave him a wide berth, whispering amongst themselves. They knew who he was now. The legend was real, and he was walking among them. After a few minutes, a young operator approached his table hesitantly. He was one of the new guys from the barracks Vance had visited earlier. Petty Officer Miller, calcined Rook. He was young, with a wiry build and eyes that held a mixture of fear and determination. "Master Chief," Rook asked, holding his tray. "May I?" Vance gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit down, son." Rook sat, his movements stiff. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Vance didn't push. He just ate his food, giving the young man time. Finally, Rook spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "What you said this afternoon about the basics. You're right, it's all gotten messed up." Vance stopped eating and looked at him. "Tell me what's messed up, Miller." The simple, direct question seemed to open a floodgate. Rook hesitated, looking around nervously, as if expecting Thorne to materialize from the shadows. It's the Lieutenant Commander," Rook began, his voice trembling slightly. "He's obsessed with being the best, the fastest, the most aggressive team out here." "There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best," Vance said, his tone neutral. "No, sir, but this is different," Rook insisted, leaning forward. "It's not about the mission. It's about him. It's about looking good. We do these drills, he calls them hardening exercises." Vance's eyes narrowed slightly. "Go on. Twice, sometimes 3 times a week, after dark. He takes us, mostly the new guys, miles out into the desert. No comms with the base. He says it's to simulate being cut off. Then he runs us into the ground." Rook's voice cracked. "Full kit, live ammo. He'll set up pop-up targets, and we have to engage them while on the move, for hours. He calls it stress inoculation, but it's not training, Master Chief, it's a beatdown. Last week, a guy collapsed from heat exhaustion. Thorne just left him there, told us he was waiting out the week. We had to carry him back ourselves." Vance remained silent, his expression unreadable, letting the young SEAL pour out his story. And the gear Rook continued, gaining a bit of confidence. "His favorites, the guys who laugh at his jokes, they get the brand new scopes, the new helmets. The rest of us, we get the leftovers. My NVGs they flicker on and off. I've reported it 3 times. The supply sergeant just says Lieutenant Commander Thorne has all the new ones reserved for priority assignments." Rook finally ran out of steam, slumping back in his chair, looking exhausted and terrified, as if he'd just confessed to a capital crime. "He told us if anyone complained," Rook whispered, "they'd be out of the teams. Labeled a coward, he said he'd personally ruin their career." Vance slowly put down his fork. He looked Rook directly in the eye, and for the first time, the coldness in his own eyes was replaced by something else, a flicker of empathy. "Did you collapse from heat exhaustion, Miller?" Rook shook his head. "No, Master Chief." "Did your gear fail on an op?" "No, sir. Not yet. Then why are you telling me this? Vance asked. You're putting your neck on the line. Rook took a deep breath, his young face hardening with resolve. Because what he's doing is going to get someone killed. And that's not what I signed up for. I didn't come here to play his games. I came here to do the job, the right way. Vance held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. You did the right thing, son. Now let me do my job. He stood up, leaving his half-eaten meal. He didn't say another word, just walked out of the mess hall, his purpose clear. Rook Miller watched him go, a terrifying mix of relief and fear washing over him. He had just lit a fuse, now he could only pray he wasn't destroyed in the blast. Master Chief Vance didn't sleep that night. He went to the deserted command tent, the lone light over the central map table casting long, dancing shadows. He wasn't looking at troop positions or enemy territory. He was looking at numbers, data, the unglamorous, undeniable truth of logistics. He was the librarian, and this was his library. He started with the fuel logs for the motor pool. With a few keystrokes on a ruggedized laptop, he pulled up the past 3 months of reports. Then he cross-referenced them with the official mission logs. The numbers didn't add up. There were dozens of unauthorized vehicle signouts, always at night, always for 4 to 5 hours. They were logged as routine perimeter patrols, but they consumed twice the fuel a normal patrol would. These were Thorne's hardening exercises. Next, he moved to the armory. He pulled the ammunition expenditure reports. Again, a massive discrepancy. Thousands of rounds of 5.56mm and 7.62mm ammunition were being written off for marksmanship training, but there were no corresponding entries for range time at the FOB's official firing range. This was the ammo Rook had talked about, expended in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, unaccounted for and unregulated. It was a staggering breach of protocol. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He accessed the maintenance logs for the team's sensitive equipment. He found Rook's reports on the faulty night vision goggles. Each one had been marked as repaired and returned to service by the supply sergeant, a man known to be one of Thorne's loyalists. No parts had been ordered. No actual work had been done. It was a paper trail of lies, designed to maintain a perfect readiness chart while actively endangering his own men. Vance sat back, the blue glow of the screen illuminating his grim face. This was worse than simple neglect. This was systemic, deliberate deception. Thorne wasn't just an arrogant officer, he was a liability, actively sabotaging his own team's capabilities for the sake of his ego. He was manufacturing a crisis, risking lives for training that served no purpose other than to stroke his own vanity. He pulled up satellite imagery archives of the area around Fobdagger. It took him over an hour, but he found it. Faint vehicle tracks leading out to a series of remote, rocky canyons about 10 miles from the base. Tracks that corresponded with the dates and times of the fuel and ammo discrepancies. He even found thermal signatures from one of the previous week's drills, faint heat blooms in the sand where men had been running, firing, and collapsing. The evidence was irrefutable. The final piece of the puzzle was the personnel files. He read through the after-action reports Thorne had filed. They were glowing. Filled with buzzwords like proactive, aggressive, and overwhelming force, he painted himself as a paragon of the modern SEAL officer. Then Vance read the peer reviews of the junior operators. They were bland, sterile, and almost identical. The kind of reviews you write when you're too scared to tell the truth. But buried in the file of the operator who had collapsed from heat exhaustion, Vance found what he was looking for. A request for transfer, citing personal reasons. It had been denied by Thorne, with a handwritten note in the margin. Lacks mental toughness required for this operational tempo. Thorne wasn't just breaking rules, he was breaking men. And then blaming them for being broken. Vance closed the laptop. The sun was just beginning to touch the horizon, casting a pale, gray light across the desert. He had everything he needed. He had the logs, the satellite data, the personnel records. He had the testimony of a brave young SEAL. He had seen the decay with his own eyes. The case against Lieutenant Commander Thorne was built. Not on opinion or hearsay, but on cold, hard facts. Now, all Vance had to do was wait. He knew Thorne. He knew that an ego that large, when challenged, wouldn't retreat. It would double down. It would seek to prove itself in the most spectacular way possible. And in doing so, it would walk right into the trap Vance had just finished setting. 3 days later, the call came down. A high-value targeting insurgent bombmaker had been located in a fortified compound 30 miles north of Fob Dagger. It was a time-sensitive target, and Strike Team Ares was the designated quick reaction force. For Lieutenant Commander Thorne, this was a gift from the gods. It was his chance to prove himself, to put the meddling Master Chief in his place with a display of tactical brilliance and overwhelming success. The briefing was held in the command tent. The air was thick with tension. Thorne stood before the tactical map, laying out his plan with a confident, almost theatrical flair. It was complex, aggressive. It involved a low-altitude helicopter insertion, a multi-point simultaneous breach, and a rapid, violent assault. It was the kind of plan that looks great on a whiteboard, but has a dozen potential failure points in the real world. Ares 1 and 2 will hit the main gate here, Thorne explained, pointing with a laser. Ares 3 will fast rope onto the roof to provide overwatch and breach from the top down. Total surprise, total shock, and awe will be in and out in less than 10 minutes. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Captain Miller looked uncertain, but was hesitant to question his star officer. The other staff officers nodded, impressed by Thorne's confidence. Then, Master Chief Vance, who had been standing silently in the back of the tent, spoke. "That plan will get men killed, Lieutenant Commander." The words dropped into the room like a grenade. Thorne's face flushed with anger. "Excuse me, Master Chief," he snarled. Vance walked forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He pointed to the map. "Your helicopter insertion is too close to the compound. They'll hear you coming from 5 miles out. You lose the element of surprise before your boots even touch the ground." He moved his finger. "Fast roping onto an unscouted roof is a gamble. What if it's reinforced? What if they have men waiting up there? You're splitting your force and putting Ares 3 in a death trap." He looked Thorne in the eye. "And your main assault shock and all that just means you're planning to be loud, not smart. You're assuming a passive defense. You have no contingency for a coordinated counterattack. You have no plan for a failed breach. You have no casualty collection point that isn't directly in the line of fire." Vance's critique was devastating. It was a complete, methodical dismantling of Thorne's entire strategy. He wasn't just pointing out flaws, he was exposing Thorne's tactical philosophy as shallow and reckless. Thorne's fists were clenched at his sides. This was the ultimate humiliation to be dressed down on the fundamentals, in front of his superiors and his own men, by the very person he had dismissed as an old man. "With all due respect, Master Chief," Thorne spat, his voice dripping with venom, "you've been behind a desk for God knows how long. Tactics have evolved. This is how we operate now. Fast, hard, decisive. There's nothing evolved about being stupid," Vance retorted, his voice still level. "Fundamentals don't change. You secure your insertion point. You maintain force concentration. You plan for what happens when it all goes wrong. You didn't do any of that." The tension in the tent was unbearable. Thorne's face was a mask of pure fury. "This is my team, and that is my plan. We are executing as briefed," he shouted, jabbing a finger at Vance. "You can stay here and keep your dusty old rulebooks company." Captain Miller looked back and forth between the two men, paralyzed with indecision. He knew Vance was right, but openly siding against his own SEAL team commander was a career-ending move. Vance didn't even look at Miller. He held Thorne's gaze. "Fine," he said, the word chillingly calm. "You go, but I'm going with you." Thorne laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "What, you gonna carry my ammo, old man?" "No," Vance said. He turned to the stunned communications officer. "Patch me into the command net for this operation. I'll be operating as tactical advisor from the TOC. And get me a direct line to the helicopter pilots." He turned back to Thorne, his eyes like chips of ice. "You may be the commander on the ground, Lieutenant Commander, but I will have oversight. If you deviate from sound tactical principles, if you put my men at unnecessary risk, I will not hesitate to countermand your orders directly, in real time." It was an unprecedented move, a nuclear option. An enlisted man, regardless of his reputation, threatening to override a commissioned officer in the middle of a live combat operation. It was a direct, public challenge to Thorne's authority and competence. Thorne was speechless. He could refuse, but that would be an admission of cowardice. He could argue, but he knew Captain Miller would be forced to side with the legendary Master Chief. He was trapped. "Fine," Thorne finally bit out, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "Have it your way. Just try to keep up." He stormed out of the tent, his team scrambling to follow. Vance watched him go, his expression unchanging. The die was cast, the classroom lesson was over. The final, brutal exam was about to begin. The night was moonless, a perfect blanket of black for the operation. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, or TOC, the only light came from the glow of monitors displaying drone feeds and tactical data. Master Chief Vance sat at the central console, a headset over his ears, his face impassive. Captain Miller paced nervously behind him. The comms crackled to life. "Hello one, inbound to drop point Alpha, 5 minutes out." Vance leaned into his microphone. "Hello one, this is Librarian. Reconfirming your approach vector. Maintain high altitude until 2 miles out, then spiral down. Do not fly a straight line in." The pilot sounded surprised. Roger that, Librarian." High altitude until 2 out. He was used to taking orders from Thorne, who always demanded a fast, low-level approach for the shock and awe effect. On the drone feed, a grainy infrared image, Vance watched the 2 Black Hawk helicopters adjust their course. Thorne's voice cut in, laced with irritation. "Librarian, what are you doing? I want them low and fast." "Negative, Viper." Vance's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "We're doing this clean. You lost surprise the moment this mission was approved. Now we prioritize survival." Thorne was silent, but the fury was palpable, even over the radio. The helicopters reached the insertion point, a ridge overlooking the compound. The SEALs fast-roped to the ground. As the last man landed, a muzzle flash erupted from the compound's roof. A single round pinged off the side of one of the departing helicopters. Vance's voice was instant. "Contact roof. All teams, take cover. They were waiting for you." Thorne's plan had failed before it even began. The rooftop Overwatch team, Ares 3, was now pinned down behind a low wall on the roof, taking heavy fire. "Ares 3 is pinned." A frantic voice yelled over the comms, "We can't move." Thorne's voice was tight with panic. "Ares 1 and 2, assault the main gate. Assault the gate now. We have to draw their fire." It was a reckless order, sending his men into a prepared kill zone. "Negative, Viper, hold position." Vance's voice was a whip crack of authority, overriding Thorne completely. "All teams, hold, suppressive fire only." "Captain, I need air support, danger close." While Miller relayed the request, Vance focused on the drone feed. He saw the muzzle flashes, analyzed the firing positions. He was a chess master, seeing the entire board, while the players on the ground could only see the next square. "Rook," Vance's voice was suddenly calm, speaking directly to the young operator on the roof. "Talk to me. What do you see?" Rook, huddled behind cover, his heart hammering, was startled. "Librarian, a 3 shooters, sir, on the far side of the roof, behind some AC units." "Good," Vance said. "Now look to your left. There's a lower roof section. Can you get to it?" Negative, that's a 20-foot drop." "Look again, son." Vance's voice was patient. "There's a conduit pipe running down the wall. It'll hold you. You slide down, you flank them. The rest of Ares 3 will provide cover fire. Can you do it?" There was a pause. It was an unconventional, risky move. It required skill and courage. It was the kind of move Thorne, with his textbook brute force tactics, would never even consider. "I can do it," Rook said, his voice firm. "Viper, you hear that?" Vance said, his voice now hard as steel, directed at Thorne. "Your job is to support your men. Have your team lay down heavy suppression on those AC units, on my mark." Thorne, humiliated and rudderless, could only comply. All Ares elements fire on the AC units. A storm of gunfire erupted from the ground teams, hammering the rooftop positions. Over the radio, they could hear Rook's heavy breathing as he swung over the wall and began his descent. "I'm on the lower roof," Rook panted, moving to flank. On the drone feed, Vance watched Rook's tiny heat signature move stealthily along the edge of the building. He was a ghost. "Rook, you're in position," Vance said. "On my mark, engage." He waited a beat, letting the enemy get comfortable with the suppression from the front. "Mark 3 sharp," Distinct cracks echoed over the comms, different from the chaotic automatic fire. On the drone feed, the 3 enemy muzzle flashes on the roof winked out, one by one. Targets down. Rook's voice was steady. Rooftop is clear. The rest of Ares 3 let out a cheer of relief. Vance had just saved them, using a rookie operator and a piece of drainpipe. With the rooftop threat gone, Vance redirected the assault. He didn't use the main gate. He had seen a weak point on the drone feed, a crumbling section of the rear wall. He directed Ares 2 to breach it with explosives while Ares 1 provided cover. It was a simple, textbook flanking maneuver, the fundamentals. They breached the wall, flowed into the compound, and within minutes, the firefight was over. The HVT was captured. The mission was a success, but it was messy. 2 operators had been wounded in the initial contact wounds they would not have sustained if Vance's initial warnings had been heeded. And everyone on the net, from the pilots to the command staff to every single operator on the ground, knew who had failed and who had saved them. The flight back to Fob Dagger was silent. There was no backslapping, no victory cries. There was only the quiet hum of the helicopter and the heavy weight of what had just happened. Lieutenant Commander Thorne sat by himself, his helmet on, staring out into the darkness. He was a commander in name only. He had been utterly and completely broken. The moment the helicopters touched down at Fob Dagger, the atmosphere was electric. Medics rushed the 2 wounded operators to the infirmary. The rest of Strike Team Ares disembarked in silence, their faces grim. They avoided looking at Thorne, their gazes instead finding Master Chief Vance as he stepped out of the talk. They looked at him with a mixture of awe, respect, and gratitude. He had been their lifeline. Thorne strode past his men, his face a thunderous mask of rage and humiliation, and headed directly for Vance. "You undermined me," Thorne seethed, getting right in Vance's face. The smell of sweat and cordite rolled off him. "You countermanded my orders in a live firefight. I'll have you up on charges. I'll see you court-martialed." Vance didn't flinch. He just stood there, letting Thorne vent, his pale eyes steady. When Thorne finally ran out of breath, Vance spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying with absolute finality. "No, Lieutenant Commander, you won't." He held up a small digital recorder. Every word spoken over the command net tonight was recorded. "Your flawed plan, my warnings, your refusal to listen. Your panic when things went wrong. My orders that saved your men, and most importantly, Rook's takedown of the rooftop threats." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And that's just tonight. Captain Miller is currently securing your personal laptop and all the logbooks from the armory and motor pool, the ones you and your cronies have been falsifying for months. The evidence of your unauthorized drills, the proof of your misappropriation of equipment. The transfer request you denied for the SEAL you almost killed with heat stroke." Vance took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're not bringing me up on charges, son. You're being relieved of command, effective immediately. And you will be flown out of here at 0600 to face an investigation that will, in all likelihood, end your career." Thorne stared at him, his mouth opening and closing silently. All the fight, all the arrogance, drained out of him, replaced by the stark, cold reality of his ruin. He looked around and saw his men watching. There was no sympathy in their eyes. Only contempt. He had betrayed their trust, and they knew it. Without another word, Thorne turned and walked away into the darkness, a commander who no longer had a command. The next morning, as Thorne was quietly escorted to a departing transport plane, Vance gathered the remaining members of Strike Team Ares in the briefing tent. The mood was somber, uncertain. Vance stood before them, not as a judge, but as what he had always been, a master chief, a teacher, a guardian of the ethos. "Look around you," he began, his voice calm and steady. "What happened last night, what's been happening for months, is a failure, not just of one man, but of a team. A team that allowed ego to replace humility. A team that valued loyalty to a man over loyalty to the mission and to each other." He looked from face to face. The SEAL ethos isn't just a paragraph you memorize. It's a promise that you will never leave a man behind. That includes the man whose gear is failing because someone else got the new stuff. It includes the man being run into the ground in the desert in the name of some twisted idea of toughness. You protect your brothers. In combat, and back here at the FOB, some of you forgot that. His eyes landed on Rook, and some of you did not. Petty Officer Miller showed courage last night, not just when he flanked those gunmen, but days ago when he sat across from me in the mess hall and told the truth, knowing it could cost him everything. That is what honor looks like." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "This team is broken, but it can be fixed. It will be fixed. We're going back to basics, maintenance, marksmanship, small unit tactics. You will learn to trust your gear, and more importantly, you will learn to trust each other again. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one who does the right thing, especially when no one is watching." He looked at the senior enlisted man in the room, a seasoned operator who had been sidelined by Thorne. "Senior Chief, you're in command until a replacement officer arrives. Your first order of business is a full, top-to-bottom equipment inspection. Every weapon, every piece of gear. I want a real readiness report on my desk by sundown, not a fantasy." The senior chief nodded, his expression resolute. "AA, Master Chief." A new chapter for Strike Team Ares had begun. The rot had been cut out. The long, painful process of healing and rebuilding was about to start. 2 months later, Fobdagger was a different place. The swagger and noise of Strike Team Ares had been replaced by a quiet, focused professionalism. The gear was immaculate. The vehicles were perfectly maintained. The reports were accurate. The team moved as one, their trust in each other rebuilt through countless hours of hard, fundamental training, all overseen by the watchful eye of Master Chief Vance. Vance was packing his small duffel bag. His work was done. A new, promising young lieutenant had been assigned to lead the team, an officer Vance had personally vetted. He was walking across the compound for a final checkout with Captain Miller when he saw Rook Miller, who now carried himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He was teaching a new batch of operators the proper way to inspect their body armor plates. "Leaving so soon, Master Chief?" Rook asked, a small smile on his face. "My job here is finished," Vance said. "Your job is just getting started." I wanted to thank you," Rook said, his voice sincere. "You didn't just fix the team. You reminded us what we're supposed to be." Vance put a hand on the young SEAL's shoulder. "You did that, son. You had the courage to speak up. All I did was listen. Never lose that. Don't ever be afraid to be the one voice speaking the truth in a room full of noise." Vance turned to leave, but then paused. "One more thing, Miller. Sir, that move you made on the roof sliding down the pipe. That wasn't in any manual. That was pure instinct. That was the operator in you coming out. Trust that instinct. It'll keep you alive long after the rulebooks are written." Rook nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "Yes, Master Chief." As Vance's transport helicopter lifted off, kicking up a cloud of dust, he looked down at Fobdagger. He saw a team that had been brought to the brink of disaster by ego and arrogance. But he also saw a team that had been pulled back by the core tenets of their creed, honor, courage, and an unbreakable commitment to the man next to them. His legacy wouldn't be in the reports he filed or the officer he had removed. It would be in the quiet professionalism of the operators below. It would be in the life of a young SEAL named Rook, who had learned that true strength wasn't about being the toughest, but about being true to the ethos. The Librarian had come, restored order to his house, and was now on his way to the next library that needed saving. The real work, the work of being a SEAL, would continue, stronger and truer than before. So, what did you think? An incredible story of quiet competence and the devastating consequences of unchecked ego. The moment Lieutenant Commander Thorne told Master Chief Vance to go get coffee, he sealed his own fate. But this story is so much more than just a satisfying takedown of an arrogant leader. It's a powerful lesson in what true leadership and strength really are. Vance didn't need to shout. He didn't need to puff out his chest. His authority came from his competence, his experience, and his unwavering commitment to the well-being of his men. He showed us that the most powerful person in the room isn't always the one with the highest rank or the loudest voice. It's the one who knows their job, inside and out, and who leads by example. The most powerful moment for me, when Rook, the junior operator, decided to speak up. He risked his entire career, everything he'd worked for, not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. That's the kind of courage that can't be taught in a training manual. This story is a vital reminder for all of us, whether we're in the military, an office, or just navigating our daily lives. Never, Ever judge a book by its cover? The quiet, unassuming person in the corner might just be the most capable person you'll ever meet. And true leadership isn't about power or control. It's about service, humility, and enabling others to be their absolute best. What part of this story stood out to you the most? Do you believe Vance's style of leadership is the most effective? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it gave you something to think about, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who appreciates a story about true honor. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.